Well, I think that a ground incursion is probably unlikely for at least the next 48 or 72 hours, or maybe even for the duration of this week, because the Israelis need to train their 300,000 reservists. They're still trying to perfect some of their Merkava tanks to ensure that they cannot be struck. They're making some new technological advances like the Iron Stinger, and there's pressure from the U.S. So Israel's preparing, but I think they're going to take a bit of time before they go in.
Can I ask you about the optics? Because we've seen difficult images crossing, and there's been a series of rallies across the world, as we were just spelling out. How do the Israelis manage to navigate the optics around the bombardment at this stage and keep support behind them for the ability to try and free hostages and also tackle Hamas?
Well, the Israelis basically have argued that they're striking right now infrastructure and the Hamas leadership. Obviously, these strikes have gone beyond that, and many civilians have died. But the Israelis insist that it's because the militants and civilians are effectively mangling together, and they're using them as human shields. And this kind of cost in terms of casualties is somehow a tragic inevitability. So the Israelis are trying to thread the needle by claiming that they're retaliating against the people who carried out this attack, and they're preparing to remove and exterminate Hamas with a much larger invasion. But obviously, the U.S. were trying to rein them in from a full-scale ground invasion because they want more humanitarian aid to cross the Rafah crossing. There were only 20 trucks the first day, 17 trucks the next day. So obviously, it's far short. The UN says 100 are needed, and more hostage releases too.
Dr. Ramani, many questions for you, but isn't the lesson from geopolitics and dare I say it, all too recent history in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, that it is one thing to cut the head off an organisation, it is another thing to replace it with something viable and sustainable? Isn't the problem here that Israel gets itself into something that it can't get out of?
Well, that's actually what some Israeli officials have even been saying, off the record and privately to various media outlets. We don't really know what will happen next. One thing that the Israeli political establishment seems to be firmly united against is the notion of occupying the Gaza Strip or reoccupying it. So it doesn't appear that the settlements that were dismantled by Ariel Sharon back in 2005 through the unilateral withdrawal from Gaza will return. So that seems to be what the refrain is coming out of Israel. But the big question is, when you remove the Hamas leadership, what exactly do you replace it with? Do you replace it with the Palestinian Authority, which is extremely low levels of popularity in the Gaza Strip? Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas leader in Palestine as a whole, is more popular than Mahmoud Abbas by a significant margin. And Palestinian Authority people don't want to look like they're collaborating with Israel. So it's very, very hard to understand what will happen once Hamas goes. And the risk is that many civilians die in this war, that Hamas could be going underground, or new extremist movements could develop, and Israel's security could be threatened once again. So that's something that the Israelis really need to get a clearer picture of what they're going to have as their endgame.
More Palestinians and more Israelis will die. That's the point, isn't it, as well? I mean, the numbers are very, very difficult to work out how awful the death toll could be on both sides as well. We've talked a lot in this conversation, and a lot of the copy I've been reading, about the inevitability of an Israeli ground offensive in Gaza. Obviously, you talked about the training of those 300,000 reservists. Is there a chance that actually there won't be a ground incursion on the kind of scale we're talking about? Actually, there is another path?
Well, I think that that's quite unlikely right now. I mean, it seems as if the Israeli military leadership is firmly convinced that it needs to eradicate Hamas, because the attack that happened on October 7th, the gravity of it, like more than 1,400 Israelis being killed, the brutality of it, far exceeded any other of the previous provocations that led to Israel launching wars, like we saw in 2021 or 2014 or other times. So I think that the ground offensive is most likely an inevitability, but they have to be aware of the fact, obviously, and I'm sure they are aware, that reservists need to be properly trained, equipment needs to be prepared, because a ground war could invite a lot of Israeli military casualties, as well as a potential escalation from other proxies and others that could harm Israeli civilians. So Hezbollah obviously are keeping to cross-border fire across Lebanon, but the Iranians keep stirring the risk of a broader war, and the Israelis have to be careful that they regard the north as firmly as they attack the south.
Hi, I'm Joanna Bersecci, and thank you for watching. You can check out more of our videos by clicking on the boxes on the screen. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more from CNBC International. Thank you for watching.